later than 5:32, and I'll start with Tim Loughton.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. If I could briefly break into this commercial break for English wine and produce to say congratulations, Mr. Fenn, for raising this really important success story. It is a success story already, and I declare an interest as the chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Wine and Spirits, a very arduous task which I'm delighted to carry on my shoulders, but also somebody who spent his youth working at the English Wine Centre in Sussex back in the 1980s, in those days when the English wine industry was not such a quality industry, having been rejuvenated by the great pioneer of English wine, Guy Salisbury-Jones, at his Hambledon vineyard in the 1950s. It was not an easy sell, English wine, in the 1980s. We had to invent the Great English Wine Run, taking English wine bottles to Paris in a reverse of the Beaujolais wine race in order to try and promote this rather questionable project and product. But it has completely and utterly changed. English wine now is a quality product which has a premium brand around the world and is part of the great British contribution to quality food and drink, and we must not underestimate it. If I could correct one of our honourable friends, this is not British wine. British wine is a filthy product made of imported wine concentrates from abroad, has nothing British about it. It is English and Welsh wine that we are talking about, is the right terminology. But there are now, as my honourable friend says, over 500. There are not yet any Scottish vineyards I'm aware of, but if climate change continues the way that the new President of the United States may wish, then we may be having Chateau Edinburgh before the decade is out. But the success story has been huge. We're now producing some 5 million bottles of English wine per year. That is going to double by 2020 at least to 10 million bottles, with half a dozen vineyards alone, each producing at least 1 million bottles of English sparkling wine, which is 3/4 of the English wine production now. This is a huge growth success story, and it's not just the production of the wine, it's actually the cottage industry that it has become, the tourism aspect, as my friend said just now. Most of these vineyards are open to the public, have restaurants attached, have vineyard tours. Now, this is a quality product, so much so that English wine has now won no fewer than 175 awards in prestigious international wine competitions, constantly winning blind tastings up against some of the best French champagnes in particular. And I absolutely echo my own friend's words that we do need to have protective marks, and the Sussex Kite Mark in my area would be a great progress towards that. I don't, alas, Mr. Lee, have any vineyards in my own constituency, but my constituents certainly drink a lot of it. And around me we have vineyards such as Ridgeview, Bolney, Plumpton College, which now has a wine department, the only one in the whole of the country, where a Frenchman is teaching English students how to produce wine. And my favourite, one of the oldest in the country, Breaky Bottom, which markets itself as probably the best bottom in the world, and is a very fine project that they now produce. But there are some points that the government needs to take account of. We need to encourage investment. This is an expensive business, setting up a winery in the UK, much more expensive than on the continent where they have a better climate for it. There are no real tax advantages, and there's a particular tax disincentive when most vineyards will send, because of their size, will send their grapes to somewhere else to be made into wine, and they're not counted as agricultural premises as well. So the tax treatment of the whole English wine production chain does need to be looked at. There are restrictions on planting vineyards that, again, I think we need to relax. There's only 2,000 hectares of land under wine production in this country. There's 35,000 in the Champagne region in France alone. Up to now, under the EU, we've actually been restricted from planting new vineyards. Those restrictions have been relaxed until 2030, but technically we're only allowed to plant an additional 1% of vineyards a year. So another good reason why we're coming out of Europe as early as possible, because it was a very protectionist measure in the days of having wine lakes in the continent, and we certainly don't have any surplus wine in the UK because it is lapped up as soon as it is produced. So we need some help on planning, but we also need some help on duty as well. This year, wine was the only alcoholic product to receive a duty rise, and the duty on wine has gone up considerably over the last 10 years. The duty per bottle on an average bottle of wine was £1.33 back in 2007. It's now £2.08. And again, English wine producers have to pay tax at the same rate as continental wine producers who can produce it much more cheaply. So I agree with all the comments that my honourable friends have made, but we need to lead by example. Every embassy around the world should be serving as the normal staple English wine and English sparkling wine. Many enlightened ambassadors do this already. The Foreign Office should make it much easier in the supply chain for that. It is crazy that the House of Commons bar does not serve an English wine as normal. I hope my honourable friend and all other honourable friends will support a campaign to get an English guest wine in the House of Commons bars on a regular basis, just as we do British guest beers. We should be putting our money where our mouth is, and in this place supporting a fantastic quality English and Welsh product that is going to be the envy of the world, and I'm very proud to have been there in the early days when it actually wasn't much cop, but it is now.